The first forecasts that were put in front of me were pretty bleak. I started my job as managing partner right at the start of the COVID pandemic, but going through periods of crisis or difficulty can really hone leadership skills. If you have got the right people around you, can bring those teams together and make them super effective.
Did you have to go through an election process to become managing partner?
Yes, I went through an election process at that time. I'm elected to lead the firm.
Richard Med is the managing partner of Browne Jacobson LLP. With over 25 years at the firm, he previously served as a corporate partner, specializing in M&A, private equity, and joint ventures.
What makes a successful partner is an acceptance of responsibility and an acceptance of accountability. We are not a series of individual practitioners under one roof.
What's your one golden rule to be a successful partner?
It's that ownership piece.
Welcome to Beyond Billables, lessons from top law firm partners, the podcast where renowned and well-known successful law firm partners reveal the secrets for that success. I'm Stephen Rodney, founder of Integrate Coaching, where we produce tailor-made lateral programs for partners moving law firms, and formerly co-founder of Fox Rodney Search. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Richard Med, managing partner of Browne Jacobson, one of the leading independent full-service and very expanding UK law firms. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, Stephen. Great to be with you.
Thanks for being here. So, Richard, can I start by asking you what your route to being a lawyer was originally, and then partnership, and how you've come to have your current managing partner role?
Really interesting looking back, isn't it? When I was a school child, I was very much a sort of science and maths focused person. Really
Okay.
interesting. My daughter's going through all of that at the moment, and she's very similar to me. So we're having those conversations about the fact that that actually isn't inconsistent at all. In fact, it's very supportive of a career in something like law. What first attracted me to law was the logic of it, the structure of it. I always thought of drafting as almost like piecing together, equations and things like that. The nerd, really. That was my route in, and why I followed a route into law in the first place. I've been at Browne Jacobson for my entire career. I joined as a trainee 26 years ago, been here ever since. So my route from those first aspirations to this chair have all been within Browne Jacobson.
Wow. Okay. The firm's changed, enormously. I remember as a recruiter 25 years ago, I thought of Browne Jacobson very much as a sort of Midlands-based firm. I didn't think anything else of it at the time. So you must have, it's a complete different firm really now, isn't it, to when you joined?
Yeah, although lots of the core aspects of it remain intact. We're a firm that was founded in 1832, so, coming up to our 200th anniversary. You're right, the majority of that, we were entirely focused in the Midlands. That's changed over the last 20 or 30 years, but particularly over the last 10, and we're now a 7-office firm across the UK and Ireland, with offices in the Midlands, the North, the South, Wales, and the Republic of Ireland. So, yeah, we are a firm that has developed significantly. And actually, the thing about my career at Browne Jacobson, it sort of followed the same route as the path the firm's taken. I was a corporate lawyer before I took on this role. I was doing deals predominantly for, local clients in the Midlands. And by the time I left my role as a corporate partner, I was doing more and more work of national and international importance, as well as supporting, really significant and important clients in our regions. And so, yeah, that's been my journey, but the journey that the firm has followed at the same time. And it's been 6 years since I was a corporate partner. That team's expanded and grown even more significantly since that time.
Well, I saw last week, and perhaps we can talk about your laterals a bit later on, but I saw last week a couple of, laterals from large London firms. It was great to see them joining you. So, congratulations on that. So from your point of view, Richard, what makes a successful partner, apart from billing a lot? How do you think the skills you possess have helped you, make you one?
I think it's going to be a recurring theme, probably during our conversation, this concept of ownership. And I don't mean that structural ownership, although of course partners do own our business. What makes a successful partner is, an acceptance of responsibility and an acceptance of accountability for delivery, and that of course is delivery of their business plan and growth and success in their sector, but it's far broader than that. It's responsibility for their people, it's a responsibility for the wider firm and the other projects they're involved with. I think it's something that you're not taught as you're coming through. That one of the biggest differences between being in a partner role and a non-partner role isn't necessarily the amount of time you spend at work, isn't necessarily the complexity of what you do at work, but it's the acceptance of increasing levels of responsibility and being accountable for delivery. And the partners who really understand that and who demonstrate that in what they do day to day are the ones that I think are the most successful and the most significant contributors.
How do you teach your new partners that? When do you start introducing that?
Really interesting discussion, isn't it, about how many things are taught and how many things you just need to create the right environment and set the right expectations for people to grow into. We are a firm that values the concept of partnership very highly. We're not a series of individuals, we're all in it together. So of course, some of this is learned through collaboration, seeing what other people do, support, guidance, proper objective setting, all of those things. Some of it is more of a natural reaction in people, and some people get there faster than others. That sort of gap between saying, oh, this hasn't happened because X, Y, and Z, listing out a series of reasons, or no, this was my responsibility, I need to make it happen. Some things haven't gone the way I would have wanted them to, so my plan to take that forward is this. It's an interesting question as to, we do lots and lots of soft skills coaching and training with our people, not necessarily specifically on that subject. One thing I would mention, we were the first UK law firm to partner with the O-shaped movement. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, I'm not. So tell
movement
us more.
Launched by a guy called Dan Kane, who was Network Rail General Counsel, and then left that role to set up the O-shaped movement, which is a desire really to close the gap between what clients want and what law firms deliver. But one of the key principles of that is ownership. And it's been as we partner with O-shaped and talk more about that within our business, that concept comes through all the time. It'd definitely be worth looking more into that. It's a really fascinating movement.
So just on that then, ownership, you said, is key. So that's someone who was obviously very senior as a GC, tutoring law firm partners about how they need to own their relationships with clients. How does that work?
Well, I mean, O-shaped has a series of principles in it, but it's fundamentally about the importance of lawyers as human beings and clients as human beings, and having open and honest conversations around what's required. But having done that, agreeing who's going to deliver what on both sides of the equation. It's something we talk about a lot within our business. It's increasingly relevant in the world of AI, which I'm sure we will come on to talk about later in the conversation. But balancing the sort of more technical aspects of delivery with that proper human understanding of what clients want and need, and a proper understanding of how we structure our business and develop our people and support our people to deliver what clients need is all a really important part of the future.
And how long have you been using the O-shaped?
We've been partnering with
program.
O-shaped since 2022. They have some of the partner firms. Dan and his team spend a lot of time out in the market talking to GCs and law firms about some of these principles. So I would recommend viewers had a look at what they're doing.
And have you noticed, I mean, it's quite difficult to sometimes measure, how whether these things are successful. What have you noticed since your partners have been on?
One of the reasons it was so successful with us is that it aligned with our core values in any event. But what it's done is really given focus to some of that and generated some fantastic conversations with clients.
Okay, so you've mentioned ownership and the O-shaped program. Does the O stand for ownership in O-shaped?
O-shaped has five principles, all of which start with an O.
Okay.
You'll test me by seeing if I can remember all of them.
No, I won't do that. So ownership, obviously, from your point of view, is absolutely key to being a successful partner. Is there anything else that you can think of?
One of the absolute key things, and I think I touched on it already, is we are a partnership. We are not a series of individual practitioners under one roof, and that there are firms that are like that. There are some firms that are like that explicitly, and some firms that are like that just in reality. we are not one of those firms. Partnership should and does mean something. So, coming in not just with either as a promoted partner or a laterally recruited partner, with a focus not just on what I can do for myself and my clients, but where do I fit into the bigger picture? Where are the links and connections I can make across the firm, to really drive the business forward, which will make me and my people more successful, give us more opportunities, and benefit the broader firm. So that one firm approach is an absolutely critical aspect of partner sort of behavior and approach for me.
And as you grow and as you take on more laterals and open more offices, I mean, that's quite tricky to keep that one firm approach, isn't it?
Yeah, it is definitely harder than when we were smaller. So far, I'm really, really pleased with how we've done it. We, if I look at my inter-office travel bill, I wince a bit. It's it's an expensive business, and I would encourage all of my people to think about doing it as efficiently as possible. But it is an absolutely critical part of that. Obviously, with new technology, there are different ways of communicating, but we work really hard to find appropriate opportunities to get people together, to talk about what's relevant to our business, to their individual businesses, how they can come together, whether that's coming together as practice area groups or target market groups, or there are other reasons. Building those human connections are really critical. When we recruit new partners into the business, we absolutely bombard them with one-to-ones. I think some of them sort of look at the list and think, goodness, why do I need to speak to all of these people in my first 3 months? I think most of them, if not all of them, would say it was well worth it afterwards. Some of them are, of course, very relevant and critical. Others, drive opportunities or things that can benefit both parties that they weren't expecting. But the most important part of it is building that human connection around the firm. I make a really personal commitment to meeting all laterals that come into our business during the process, and also shortly afterwards, and then on an ongoing basis. Myself, our senior partner, and our leadership team are constantly traveling around the office network to meet people in person. So it gets harder as you get bigger, but it's really important to us, and we absolutely commit to it.
How many partners are you now, roughly?
We are somewhere between about 160 and 180. We're just in our promotion cycle at the moment. As you say, we've got laterals coming in. So, but yeah, we're probably upwards towards 180 partners as a
Okay.
whole across the business. Yeah.
I asked that because your point about the amount of meetings you put into new laterals diaries and them being a bit shocked, but actually, I mean, in the programs we deliver, that's really crucial, and you're still just about at the size where people can meet most other people relatively quickly. I mean, in 3 months might be a bit tricky, but certainly in the
Well, we
first
don't put
6 to 9.
we don't put 180 catch-ups in, but and those things are targeted. And by the way, it's of course not just the lawyers. There are seriously important meetings with key members of our support teams. That's increasingly relevant in a world where clients are expecting a well-delivered professional combined offer, and as the lines are blurred between legal services, technology, products, financials, all of that, those meetings are at least as important as those with other partners around the business.
I sometimes say to the laterals, actually, those meetings are more important because often some of those people will have been at the firm a long time.
Yeah.
And they kind of know, in terms of navigating the political, I don't mean political in a bad way, just the politics of a firm, and there are politics in all firms. Often it's the support staff who are able to kind of give advice on that, and better than partners often.
I find my PA giving me the benefit of her 25 years in the firm and her understanding of the politics all the time.
Indeed, there we are. So obviously, you now had a large amount of management and leadership experience. I mean, firstly, was that something you wanted to do when at what point did you decide, actually, this is something that I'd like to do in terms of playing this kind of leading role at the firm? And then once you've told us that, are there different attributes needed to make the transition from being a successful sort of line partner, as it were, to a successful leader?
I was a corporate M&A partner. One of my favorite parts of that job was working closely with clients and looking at their whole business. That's the one of the joys of a corporate lawyer's job. Obviously, we need to know our own legal expertise, but we're also the ones who pull together expertise from across our business, employment, real estate, commercial, IP, all of those things. And to do that, we need to get a proper understanding of the client's business. So I spoke to a lot of people who built their own businesses, business leaders over that period, and that understanding of their business was always the most fascinating part of the job. So as my career developed, looking for opportunities to contribute to our business became more and more important. Ultimately, when there was an opportunity to stand for the managing partner role, it wasn't one I could say no to, and I have had absolutely zero regrets about doing this. As I say, I've been here for the whole of my career, and getting a chance to run a large and growing business, but one that I'm absolutely passionate about, is a real privilege.
Okay.
In terms of the different skills that you need, of course there are some similarities as you go through that process in terms of leadership skills. I think one of the key bits, though, is understanding the difference between leadership and management. And of course, as managing partner, both of those play a part of my role. Working out how I work out how the firm should use its resources and practically deliver on its commitments and its strategy are really important. But leadership is about setting the message, bringing people along with them with the strategy. Repeating yourself all the time. I sometimes think I'm boring, but we have things that we have decided we want to do, and core strategic messages, and bringing our people along with those so that people know why they are doing what they're doing is a key part. As I say, my role is part manager, part leader, and of course, I need to balance that. But those leadership aspects are the bits that people get least exposed to as they come through. Certainly, all firm leadership.
Were you head of a department before you were managing partner?
I was, and and that was significant. Although that's you sort of buying into the broader firm vision there with lots of local management responsibility as well. And I had loads of development and support through the firm as my career progressed. As I said at the start, I was always a maths and numbers person. That's been a very critical skill in doing this job. Doing that at department level is important. Doing it on a whole firm level, really, really important. I started my job as managing partner right at the start of the COVID pandemic. I started in April 2020, where the first forecasts that were put in front of me were pretty bleak. Obviously that played out quite in a better way than any of us feared for professional services, more generally. But yeah, there was. I was asking whether my maths were right at that stage. But yeah, that was in some ways, obviously a dreadful experience for lots of people, and a really challenging leadership experience. But stepping into a role where people really needed leadership,
Yes.
I needed to grow up very quickly and develop some of those skills very quickly. Of course, alongside a senior team that we worked extremely closely through that period. But it was a really, really important step in my development as a leader. And I think, whether hopefully we don't get crises quite as big as COVID again anytime soon, but going through periods of crisis or difficulty can really hone leadership skills, and probably most importantly, can, if you have got the right people around you, can bring those teams together and make them super effective.
I'm sure the person who you succeeded probably was not that unhappy that you were the one that had to deal with that. I don't, maybe always, they were still with the firm at
They
that
were
point.
still with the firm, and they were, of course, super helpful as for providing a bit of advice. But yeah, their timing was excellent.
And did you have to go through an election process to become managing partner?
Yes, I went through an election process at that time. I've subsequently been reappointed for a second term. I'm 3 years into my second term as
Okay.
managing partner. Yeah.
And how was the election process? Because that's not something that lawyers are used to generally going through. So how was
No,
that
I mean, you
for
talked about politics earlier. Of course, partnerships are, do have small p politics in how they're run, and my role is an elected role. It's not a typical corporate structure. I'm, as managing partner, not sitting at the top of a pyramid. It's almost like more of a first among equals
Yes.
type
Yes.
leadership position, which calls for a really interesting balance of directive leadership and consensus-based leadership. I have a mandate. I'm elected to lead the firm, but of course, the opinions and views of my partners really matter, and really inform how I do my job. And you really do need to find that balance, because over consulting, focusing too much on consensus can really take all the sharp edges off what you're trying to achieve. But I've got really no mandate to just blast through on my own agenda without bringing the partnership along with me, and which is why I spend a huge amount of my time, and my senior partner does too, talking to our partners, talking to our central team directors and other people across the firm, to help inform our plans. But then when we make our plans, committing to the ownership and accountability of them, as I've talked about, and knowing when we should, or at least think we know when we should, drive forward.
And you mentioned you're in the third year of your second term. Is that, or did I mishear that? I can't remember.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So are you? I'm just interested, and hopefully you don't mind me asking. So you've been managing partner for, say, 6 years. Sounds
Yes.
like.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So each term is
Well, my first was 3, and then we changed it to 4-year terms overall. So yeah, slightly confusing.
So Richard, as someone who's obviously been involved in recruiting, a lot of laterals, and seen many laterals join Browne Jacobson, what are the main reasons, first of all, that you see as to whether some are very successful and some perhaps are less successful? And that's on the back of a report that we commissioned when I started the business, which said that up to 60% of laterals weren't as successful as everyone hoped when they joined. Which is a different way. I'm not saying they fail. I mean, some laterals do fail, but that's slightly different, I think. I'm talking about the vast majority, may not be as successful as everyone hoped. What do you think the reasons for that may be? And I'm interested how you measure the success of your laterals and the ROI they produce for the firm.
It's probably more of an art than a science, isn't it? In reality, I mean, clearly there is some science involved. All of our laterals go through a detailed business planning process with a detailed financial analysis. We are talking to them in the first place because we think there's some strategic alignment and benefit to our firm of doing it. So there is some science involved, but as you will know, that doesn't always equal success, or doesn't always equal success at the level you're hoping for. So we try and combine that with a sort of more human analysis as well. When we're talking to laterals, their business case talks about the sort of work they want to bring, how they would go about doing it, what financials they think they can achieve, but also talks about their values, their motivations for moving, why our firm and our culture appeals, what we think they can bring to our culture, and we make sure that they are discussed throughout the recruitment process and followed through on after hiring. And as I say, it's more of an art than a science, but balancing that sort of qualitative and quantitative approach, I think, sets people up for success. Of course, there's any number of reasons why things won't track exactly as set out in any business case, particularly in a world where at the moment, the external market conditions are so volatile. But I'm a firm believer that if you have the right people, they can build a successful business, notwithstanding some of those factors. So forming a view of that human fit is really important. Of course, I should say, that doesn't mean just recruiting a load of people like us. One thing that Browne Jacobson has been really focused on in the last few years is our diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments, and increasingly important our social mobility commitments, to make sure that we are not just saying, well, this person fits because he's like the rest of us or she's like the rest of us, but that key things that they bring, that openness, that willing to buy into our one firm culture, that sense of ownership and accountability, that buying into our values is there, and that we are really objectively looking at a range of different backgrounds in order to achieve that. And that applies at junior recruitment level, but also something we take very seriously when it comes to lateral recruitment.
So is there, because I'm a great believer that a lot of laterals, if you say to them, well, what would be success for you, they can't necessarily answer that sometimes, which I think is that's not a good way to start. So do you, when laterals join, do you kind of set out what success will look like in defined periods?
Well, we obviously have a business plan, and the business plan deals with all of those aspects I've just discussed, and looks at what delivery will look like over 1, 2, and 3 years across a range of those metrics. I think looking at ROI is a really interesting question. I mean, for a start, you can't look at that short term. Every new lateral joins with a different context, with a different covenant position, with a different work type and portability position, and sometimes you're hiring people to deliver work that exists already in your business, and sometimes you're hiring people that you hope can bring business with them. So you need to look at it medium term at the very least. But yeah, and I think doing it on a more individualized basis, I would love it. As the firm gets bigger, I would love the ability to look at lots of things on a very formulaic, systems-driven basis, because where you can do that, A, it makes the job easier, and B, drive consistency and other things. But yeah, given the range of different work types that exist in our business, that's not always easy to do. So again, it does require a bit of qualitative analysis as well. We have a partnership committee in our business that's got responsible for hiring, promotions, and sort of an overview of partner performance and delivery. And we have these conversations all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure. So who takes ownership of the integration process when a lateral joins?
The direct sort of recruiting partner will take overall responsibility, supported by our people team, and our people team are excellent. The number of laterals we've been doing has growing steadily over the years, and we get regularly complimented by laterals coming into our business on the support and contact they've had throughout the process, not just from our lawyers, but from our people team as well. So they will take responsibility for structuring it, but the recruiting partner will take overall responsibility. But that partner will fit into our departmental structure from a line management point of view. It will fit into our target market structure. It will obviously fit into our geographical structure. So there are senior stakeholders who buy in across the business, and of course I'll be checking in with all of them on a regular basis too.
I think the interesting thing is, because obviously you're growing everywhere, but particularly in London. How many partners roughly have you in London now? I was trying to work it out from your website, but couldn't actually.
Yeah, well, lots of our partners have a cross UK and Ireland
I can see that, yeah.
mandate, somewhere between 20 and 30. I haven't got the exact numbers right in front of me.
Yeah.
But
So-
yeah, and a growing number, as you say. And London's an important part of our business, clearly a very important legal sector in the UK market, and we've had some excellent hires over the last couple of years into London, but London's only part of our business as well. So, we've been bringing really exciting laterals across our network. Cardiff we only opened a couple of years ago, and we've seen great growth quickly there. Dublin was the year before that, and having lots of lateral conversations there, and our more established offices in the Midlands, in Manchester, and the Southwest as well. So yeah, really seeing extensive lateral activity across the network.
So with the new offices, Cardiff, Dublin, London, I know some firms find it tricky to make sure that the people they're recruiting, the partners they're recruiting, which may be coming from much larger firms fit in culturally to a much smaller relatively office than those partners have come from, as I said, whether that's London, Cardiff, Dublin, in terms of your newer offices. How do you deal with that?
We've got a range of laterals, some coming from small boutiques into what they think is a much bigger firm, some coming from much bigger firms into maybe a smaller office than they used to. They're all people. They're all people, and when you talk to them and engage with them, you're rapidly able to find the things that matter to them and make the right links and connections to make that integration work. I really don't think we've ever had a problem with that. We're a big business. We're maybe slightly more spread than some of the businesses they've joined in terms of critical mass in some locations. But in terms of critical mass overall, anyone coming from a bigger firm will, find all of the infrastructure and skill sets that they're used to. It's not something we have struggled with at all.
So coming back to you, Richard, maybe you could tell us about one or two of the best moments you've had as a partner. And you're not allowed to say being made a partner or being made managing partner for these purposes. I think that's an easy get out, but I'm sure they are in there. But one of a couple of the best moments you've had as a partner and the less good ones.
As a corporate partner,
as a lawyer, if you want.
As a corporate partner, there were loads. I sort of talked on how much I enjoyed working with people in relation to their businesses, seeing people who had founded and built a business, realizing a transaction that changed their world and gave opportunities to their people, that sort of thing, and realizing how emotional that was for people. This wasn't just transactional. This is, often really emotional. Was, an absolute pleasure to be part of lots of those things. As managing partner, there are loads. There are things that we do all the time that feel really exciting. One of my favorite times of the year, though, I'm a people person. I get energy from being around people. Once a year, me and the senior leadership tour around all of our offices and talk to all of our colleagues in those offices about what the firm's doing, about why we're doing it, about how they can get involved. I get such energy from doing those things, even when they're asking difficult questions. Actually looking people in the eye and giving them that feedback and talking about how we can all work together to deliver on our goals is, might sound a bit naff, but I just personally get real energy from it.
Maybe you should do it more than once a year.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that'll increase my inter-office travel bill even more, won't it?
Well, you don't have to go by helicopter, Richard.
No, but we are looking at.
We are.
I absolutely don't think that doing all of that virtually is in any replacement for doing it in person. But we are looking at doing it more often in between, supplemented by some virtual presentations and other things, just to make sure that cross-office dialogue really takes the firm forward, is maintained.
Yeah, I think some people have forgotten actually that face-to-face meetings can bring a lot more than online. And I think it's only when when you do those face-to-face, you suddenly remember that you can just have in some instances sort of a more in-depth conversation, can't you?
Well, you can.
Colleagues or clients.
I think where the magic happens is the coffee before and the chat after, isn't it? Because the development of those conversations doesn't happen virtually, whereas when people go for lunch or walk to the train station together afterwards and they're still processing and digesting what they've talked about, you do lose that bit. Obviously there are many benefits to our ability to talk to people within our organizations and externally very easily face to face now, but really not focusing on not losing too much of that magic is really important.
And I definitely when I was a recruiter working for various firms a long time ago, firms that were opening in London but had large national offices like you do, getting the partners in London to come up frequently to the national offices was very important. And there was a correlation actually in some cases of partners who joined the London office who didn't really want to go traveling up until Manchester or Birmingham or wherever it was, and how well they worked out. I kind of saw it occasionally, actually. I thought, okay, well, these people, they're very so London focused. They're not prepared to realize that they have colleagues who are just as talented, if not more so, than them in offices outside London. They have a kind of London snobbery, which actually, as I said, I think that did lead to some successes and some less successful partners. I don't know if
I
you
think it probably
can
just comes back
understand
to that point about buying into the one firm
Yes,
piece. If you're
yes,
joining the firm, you're joining the whole firm. You know,
yes.
London isn't a new office for us. We've had a London presence for 30 years, although we've invested heavily in it. We've got a number of colleagues there who've been there for a long time and, you know, are fully bought in. So that's really effective in drawing that in. But yeah, I absolutely agree. We don't structure our business around geography. We don't report financially by geography. We structure it by practice area nationally and, well, UK and Ireland, and by target market group UK and Ireland. And so those conversations are naturally driven laterally across the network. But yeah, absolutely. Anyone, wherever they're joining, it'd be easier for someone to join in Manchester and think I'm staying there. I'm not going anywhere else too. But yeah, I absolutely agree. Making that commitment to the whole firm is critical.
So what about a less good experience?
Well, I sort of touched on the COVID experience. That was my first experience as leadership, so I won't dwell too much on that. You know, obviously there are difficult periods in leadership. There are periods where markets aren't behaving quite as you wanted, but there are periods where you're having to deal with people issues. And I think the truth for all of us is, notwithstanding the scale of the business and the scale of your responsibilities, dealing with individuals, you know, where it's issues of performance management or, you know, other related things are hard. I think you develop a thicker skin over the period you occupy these roles, but ultimately your responsibility as a leader is to the whole business. And if you're not dealing with those more difficult conversations, you're not doing your job, and you're not meeting your responsibilities to the other 1,000 people, 1,300 people, or whoever else you have in your organization.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because as someone who, as you say, is a people person, having that ability to be a people person, but also have the ability to lead. And as you said previously, you know, consensus is very good, but there are some decisions that, you know, just need to be taken. It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And you do find the balance over time, but it doesn't mean you don't have sleepless nights before some days. But, you know, I think the day you stop having sleepless nights about some big people decisions are the days you've got your skin's got too thick, and you
Yes.
probably need to think about whether it's
Time to
still the
move
right
on.
job for you. Yeah.
So if you had an opportunity to speak to your younger self and had your time again, what do you think you would do differently?
I mean, there's loads. I think as a partner who spent a lot of their time talking to clients, particularly from a business development point of view, I would say to myself, listen more and talk less. You know, it's very easy, particularly lawyers coming through who want to be promoted, or lateral hires coming into a business, you know, feel the pressure of building that business and selling. And, you know, what I have learned over the years is that really direct, moreover, selling is far less effective than taking the time to listen to clients and prospects about what's going on in their world, what they want, and generating opportunities that way. I've also worried a lot in my career about being ready. I think I've learned as I've got through that. Sorry, that doesn't. I don't want to say I'm not prepared for. I don't prepare for things, but you know, being ready for the next role, for the next promotion. Of course, you should make every effort to be ready, but nobody's fully ready. So if you think you've got the skills and the talents and experience you need, don't think that anybody is the full package before taking on a particular role. I think that I would say that to myself, and I would say that to colleagues across our business as well. As managing partner, I think my biggest learning has been really that success is cumulative, rather than, you know, you have big bang successes. You know, you win a big tender, you do a great piece of work, you score a hire that you really wanted, you know, you have a great year of financial results. But actually now, after 6 years in the job, looking back at, you know, how we've transformed the firm over that period, you realize it's the it's the series of small decisions, it's the day-to-day progress that you make that has that big cumulative impact. So if you have some big wins along the way, great. But if you don't think that you're not being successful, try and look at it on a cumulative basis.
Yes, and that's obviously tricky because you're doing every day, aren't you?
Yeah, and but I said that doesn't just apply in my role. That applies, to laterals coming into a business, to people throughout our business. Take the time every now and then to step out and think not how the last week or month's gone, but how has the journey gone so far? Is there progress being made? And can I do more of what's led me to this place?
Yes, and actually, your point about being the readiness, I thought that's very interesting because I think what you're saying is don't give yourself such a hard time for worrying about whether you're ready for the next role, because no one can be completely ready, and perhaps even if you think you are completely ready,
Yeah,
then maybe there's no challenge in that role for you.
maybe yes. I think that's probably right. I mean, obviously, people need certain skills and abilities in order to do certain roles, but that's sort of in a monologue that we all have from time to time. But other people might be more ready than me, or have been more ready than me stepping in. I think with a few more grey hairs and a bit more experience, you realise that that's not necessarily always the case.
Have you learned that from mentors? I mean, it'd be interesting to hear what kind of mentors you've had. Was that something that someone said to you, or was that something you've realised?
It's probably something that's come through in lots of conversations over the years. I've been at this firm a long time because of its people, and I've benefited within my professional career from lots of excellent mentors, many of whom are still with our business, who've taught me the balance between being 100% right, and I don't mean from a legal point of view, I just that need to sort of establish that you're in the right, balancing that with being commercial, and most importantly from our culture, with being fair. And there's been lots of people who have helped guide me through that journey. All of my commitment to one firm, and that collaborative approach, comes from that mentorship that I've received during my career, and I continue to benefit from the wisdom of others in the business, including people who've come through after me, and perhaps more junior than me in terms of age and experience. But you've got to learn from all the skills and talents around you, haven't you? And that comes back to all of those conversations that you need to have on a day-to-day basis to do your job as well as you can.
Yes, I mean, we had someone on a little while ago who talked about, in a similar role to you, who talked about how they were involved in reverse mentoring now, and particularly, and we'll come on to the world of the future, learning from the junior lawyers, and not just lawyers, but junior support staff as well, was important. Is that something that you guys, whether it's you or other senior partners in the firm, have looked at, that kind of reverse mentoring?
Yeah,
kind of
so
program?
we've done some of it, more formally, mostly just through conversations. I'm just picking up on that support team point, which I've made a couple of times, but is so critical and becoming more critical. Learning and understanding what's happening in those worlds, because it is of increasingly direct impact on not just how we deliver services, but the services the clients actually want. Increasingly we're taking people from our tech team or our finance team with us to meet clients, to have those discussions. Our facilities team providing the facilities that actually deliver for what clients want.
Yeah.
Now, all of that, and making sure, obviously it's really important to me in my role, but it's important to all of our partners in delivering what clients actually want in the way that clients want it, to make sure we're having those conversations.
So looking ahead, Richard, what factors, and we've mentioned AI, and this is probably the time to talk about that, but what other factors, AI or otherwise, do you think are going to affect partner and firm success going forward? And plainly, PE is something which is a hot topic at the moment. I'm not expecting you to reveal that Browne Jacobson's about to take a huge amount of private equity, even if you were. So I'm not looking for that. But just generally, how you think things like AI and PE might affect firms like
Yeah,
yours
look,
going forward.
they're all linked issues, aren't they? We've seen in accountancy private equity coming in and largely funding consolidation of smaller firms. But I think increasingly we will see external investment as a way to facilitate and pay for some technological advancement in some firms. We may see that. I think we will see more of it in law. Obviously, we haven't seen anywhere near as much of it to date as we've seen in accountancy. But it's out there and it's growing. It's not a strategy in itself. You've got to decide what your strategy is. You've got to decide how much funding you need to deliver your strategy, and of course, you've got to look at where you get that funding from and which type of funding is right for you. And that might be right for some firms and not right for others. But what it is doing, I think, is forcing firms to have those conversations, to make conscious decisions, not just, oh, well, we don't really understand it, so we're not sure it's for us, so we'll just crack on doing what we're doing and, see what happens. I think if you're doing your job properly, you need to be taking that step back, having regular strategic discussions around what it is you want to achieve. And if you're committed to your partnership model and all the benefits that go with that, making sure that can deliver what you're looking for. I think it'll be really helpful in forcing law firms and other professional services businesses to continually look at how they operate in a more business-like manner, which is just going to be critical in an ever more uncertain, ever more competitive environment out there. And whether you take external investment or not, the impact it will have on how professional services operates, I think will be significant. AI we've touched upon earlier. There are, it will inevitably change the world. Anyone who's used any of the more sophisticated tools, we've signed a deal with Legora, which is going extremely well. We've got great buy-in across the firm on the use of Legora to drive up quality, to deliver things in different ways within the firm. And it's an exceptional tool, as are some of the others on the market. But we're only in the foothills of where it will go. Discussions around, what that means for our business, for our clients' businesses, for the world. We could only influence some of that. But the one thing I am clear on, and I'm sure you must have heard this before, this isn't rocket science, that I'm totally believe that the role for individuals with real human skills remains absolutely critical. But individuals with real human skills that are using these tools will be the winners. And there isn't someone who says, look, I'm great with people and I bring insight and experience, so I can ignore the AI transformation. I think that's extremely naive.
And how are you, because you mentioned right at the beginning, that you enjoyed sort of talking to clients as a corporate partner. And I don't know whether you still, as in your role now, talk to a lot of clients, but how are they seeing things on the AI front overall? Because that's going to drive what you do on it, presumably.
Yeah, there's, of course, clients are all having their own individual discussions. There aren't many businesses immune to the impacts of the AI revolution, so they're focused on their internal AI transformation as much as how people are providing services to them will use it. And like law firms, there is a huge range of clients, some of whom are far further ahead in their AI journey than others. So of course clients are interested in how our industry and the provision of services might change and develop in the future, but there is a huge range of views and experience in those conversations.
And on the PE front, are you concerned at all that if one of your competitor firms did take external investment, that might lead to pressures from your partners, and it might not be the right thing for you guys to do? I mean, you've talked a lot about the one firm approach and feeling as a true partnership, and taking external investment would definitely change that. So I do worry that some firms may end up doing it just because one firm's done it and they all feel pressured. A lot of other firms feel pressured to do it.
I think you need, I go back to what I said before, you need to decide what your strategy is as a firm and what you want to achieve, and be convinced that strategy is robust no matter what happens around you, and bring your partners along on that journey. Of course, all firms should be making sure their partners understand what's happening out there, in technology, in investment in professional services more generally, and in other global political and economic changes. But I think you've got to decide on a strategy that works for you, not without regular review, because the world changes quickly. But just because your neighbour down the road does something, if you're happy with what your plans are and that you're delivering on them, whatever they may be, whether that's taking investment or not taking investment, or that's how you should be running your business and speaking to your partner.
So that's the case. So I do not for you guys, but I do fear there's going to be some firms who are going to make the wrong decisions just based on what the mayors down the road have done. We'll see what happens. I suspect it will happen this year, probably, is my gut feeling. Something will happen. It'd be interesting also to see, obviously DWF took PE investment, when the time comes for that private equity provider to kind of roll their investment on, how that works, because that's plainly what PE in the market to win, and that's their business model.
Yeah, we'll be watching with interest.
We're moving to the end now, Richard. What's been a fascinating podcast episode. If I could ask you 2 final questions. First one, what are your 3 non-negotiable behaviors for you and your team? Mentioned one previous.
It would be odd if what I was saying there was inconsistent with what I'd said before. I think that one firm approach, absolutely non-negotiable for senior leaders within our business, partners or senior support professionals, that sense of ownership and accountability and an absolute commitment to living our values. Try not to take myself too seriously. And I went to a comedy show recently where they were taking the mickey out of corporate values and businesses' statements of corporate values. Everyone around me was laughing, and I was thinking, oh gosh, I had a big role in writing hours.
Did you put your hand up and say that to the comedian?
No. I kept my head down during that bit. But I came back and I thought, look, I get the joke. Because a lot of people write them, and we really tried to write ours based on 20, 30 years of experience of what's important, what nebulous concept of culture that we keep talking about, that lots of firms talk about. What does it actually mean? So we did some work to try and define it, and I think the right description of what we do, so getting people buying into those is non-negotiable.
Good. Okay. And finally, what's your one golden rule to be a successful partner?
It's that ownership piece again. I think it's owning it together. It's like if I bring together what I just said, combining that one firm ownership and values piece. Let's take collective responsibility and accountability for the success of the firm and do it in a values-driven way. I don't think you can go far wrong.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you, Richard, for being our guest on Beyond Billables, Lessons from Top Law Firm Partners. I'm sure everyone's going to really enjoy watching and listening to what you've said. It's been absolutely fascinating. So thank you for making the time. I'm extremely glad you did.
Thanks, Stephen. Great to talk.
So join us on our next episode of Beyond Billables, Lessons from Top Law Firm Partners, where we'll have another top partner who will reveal the secrets of their success. See you next time.